Welcome to the YHROCU and ERSOU Women in Tech panel. This video will show you the discussion between our great panellists on one of the 5 topics covered in the panel. You can find links to the whole Women in Tech panel and to other topics in the description. In this video, we will be asking, is the tech industry doing enough to encourage women into the industry?
Move on to talking about if the tech industry itself is doing enough to encourage women into their jobs. And if not, how do you think this can be done? This was actually a question submitted by our winner, Hannah. So thank you to Hannah for that one. I believe Liz was first.
Controversial viewpoint. I think our industry suffers from a bit of a image problem. There's the pen tester. This is what we expect a pen tester to look like. And there's a whole bunch of work there that needs to be addressing. Well, okay, what exactly does that look like? Who is that? I look nothing like my colleagues. The skills and experience I bring is very different. It's such a diverse set of skills that can contribute that actually I think it's more, there's an image problem there, right? It's how do we advertise these roles? So a lot of work we're working internally at the moment is how do we advertise roles that don't, I mean, there's language bias, there's how do we describe what we're actually after? We're after a problem solver, but that we can use language or describe it in certain ways that are off-putting for certain groups. Similarly, and I hate this, but actually showing women in the roles, having role models and representatives in those fields makes a massive difference. Because otherwise you're not challenging that stereotype and going, oh no, they're just men in this office. And you're like, great, that's not going to help. So I think there's an image problem with penetration testing or cybersecurity. That's a thing that if we address that, part of that is showing more women in roles, showing a diverse people doing their jobs and flourishing because of the diversity, because that's really what we're talking about here, right? New minds, new thoughts, new ideas makes everything better. So that's kind of my stance on that.
Yeah, thank you. Eliza, is your hand up from last time or is it for this question as well?
It's from last time, but I've still got an answer, so I'll just chip in, shall I?
Yeah.
So I've been to loads of different events that have been general tech events and not cybersecurity related. And I've genuinely been the only woman, or maybe one of 2 out of loads. So I don't know about tech in general, and I can't speak on that topic. But what I've seen hasn't been great. But that is very much been siloed to London. I don't know if that makes a difference. In terms of cybersecurity, I have seen a massive improvement. I think, for example, going to events that were very male driven, very male focused, the language was and the atmosphere was very male. If that even makes any sense, you know, the language used, although not offensive, and I don't get offended, it was just very much like bro culture, and it just felt like you couldn't really ask a question. If you were to ask a question that was deemed a stupid question, someone would call you out on it. So it just wasn't very. A lot of these events, although everyone was nice, they just didn't feel comfortable. And I think for me, I'm just a girl's girl. I like to be around other women. So maybe that's just personal preference as well. But off the back of my experiences, I created the Ladies Hacking Society, and I know there's been other women that have done similar as well. So just having all these different women's groups that feed into mixed groups. For example, we get so many women that are new to cybersecurity that don't really feel comfortable going to a mixed event for whatever reason, and they almost start off with the Ladies Hacking Society, and then after a year or a year and a half we lose them, and they end up going to DC 44Con and SteelCon and, you know, all these other different conferences, which is awesome, and it's exactly what we want, and really it's exactly what it's there for. And some of the bigger events like InfoSec, for example, and Black Hat, they'll buddy up and they'll just go as like a little group and have sort of like a girls' day out at a conference, and that's really cool, and I'm really pleased that that's the way it's gone. So I think that diversity in that term is definitely in gender terms is definitely improving. I've seen massive improvements, and I think, you know, largely men are very, very welcoming within our industry, and a lot of them want to see more women in cybersecurity roles. I mean, obviously there's a bad egg, but you'd get that in any industry. You'd get that in legal, you'd get that in medicine, and anywhere. So I don't think there's any negative connotations to having an increased women in cyber that's specific to InfoSec. I keep saying if that makes sense at the end of everything, as if I'm speaking in Japanese and everyone's just kind of going, yeah, all right.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Heidi, please.
Thank you. So I think that's a great question, really. I just have a couple of points, some of them following on from Liz's comment as well. So I think image is a big thing, whether you work in tech industry or in university, for example. I think computer science in general. So, for example, I'm not working in cybersecurity, and already on this call, there's been lots of words I don't necessarily know what means. And so if you are in school and thinking, I probably like something like this, but I don't understand everything, don't forget that everyone will have started from scratch. So everyone will start with small steps, try and find out a few things, and then kind of work from there. I think we have a big responsibility of making sure that we don't come across as being a sort of a difficult to enter career. It can seem quite intimidating, I think. And another thing I want to say is on perhaps your personality. So on this call here, I think there's lots of kind of outgoing people, and you might sit there thinking that's not quite like me. I'm very introverted myself, and some of the ideas we've had I would not have wanted to do when I was 16, 17, 18. But you can do certain things, so you might be better off or feel more comfortable, for example, sending an email to people rather than going up and speaking to people. So just do what you are comfortable with, sometimes trying to push barriers, but there's lots of different ways and lots of different personalities that would be great in this kind of area. So it's open for everyone, I think.
Thank you. On to Danni.
Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, Liz said a great thing earlier, which was we have a bit of an image problem, and it's all about surfacing that. And I think one of the core ways that we do that is by building a community, the same way that we're all here together, and the same way that these Women in Tech events come through is that we've identified the problem. It's still a problem, and frankly, it probably still will be a problem in the years to come, but it's about managing that in a way that works for you. So at my company, Palantir, we have an excellent Women in Tech community where there's kind of a space where I feel comfortable reaching out to people, making friends with faces that perhaps look like mine or act like mine or dress like mine. And so finding that network within the environment that may or may not suit you is something that is a really, really supportive force. And additionally, a lot of major companies do some really positive outreach events as well as initiatives. So Palantir does a Women in Tech scholarship as an example, which is geared towards bringing women through and giving women an additional opportunity just to feel like they can have that space to grow in their own way. And you can take that however you will, but I think a lot of major companies do make an effort to start the conversation, but it is essentially on us as women to then bring that conversation through and then build that network and take it from there.
Brilliant, thank you. On to Holly Grace.
So looking at the question directly in terms of like, are companies doing enough to, you know, encourage people into the industry and that kind of thing? I had recently a very simple task. I need to hire a software developer. So I need to write a job description for my software developer. And I thought, this is really easy. I'll go online and I'll look at everybody else's job description and I'll take the good bits from it. And what I discovered is, oh my gosh, job descriptions are awful for pushing people out of the industry, highlighting industry stereotypes, or maybe even just leading people to kind of self-exclude from certain jobs. The way that I found myself trying to solve that problem is probably not good. I'm not here to bring you a solution. I'm just here to highlight a problem. I find myself trying to counter the maybe presumed default, the presumed stereotype of this industry, and saying things like, look, we don't need you to work 9 to 5, we don't need you to work Monday to Friday, we don't need you to be office based, and effectively got to the end where I just had a whole list of like, we don't need you to do these things. And the reason I felt I had to write the job description in that way is because all of the other job descriptions, that was the default, and that isn't what we need. So do I think the industry can do more? Yes, I think the industry can do more to be aware that job descriptions can highlight industry stereotypes that are maybe bad, and also can lead really strong candidates to self-exclude. I think it was it Nicola earlier who pointed out as well, sometimes job descriptions have a whole list of prerequisites, and maybe you don't need them all, but if you list them as required, some people will not apply to that job. And then actually, in actuality, we find out that they're not really required, they're just maybe strongly desirable. So yeah, I think we can do more. I think job descriptions are a really simple thing for organizations to be aware of. And please, can we improve them, because they're awful.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. On to Nicola.
Great. Yeah, I'm so glad that you called me next, because I wanted to answer that with Holly. So just picking up some of the points. So if we're going to have a grow culture, we need to kill the bro culture. Just full stop. Because the amount of times I see women wanting to get ahead, wanting to network, and the only way to do it is, oh, look, there's a Twitter Friday night, we all have beer and then we slag each other off event, which I now don't go to. I've been to a few of them and I just it's like, this is icky. This is not what I signed up for, but I see women in them because where else is there? So there's, we need to call those things out. And I'm sorry, there's going to be some guys that are really upset by that, but I don't care, because those are the same guys that on the Monday morning are saying we want more women. Well, the other thing with what Holly said is absolutely true, not only for women, but also for people like many autistic people. Will also not apply, because we tend to be more literally minded. If a description says, we want all these things. So one of the things that we talk about in neurodiversity, which also applies to women statistically, is to ask employers, and I speak to all recruitment agencies about this, is to ask employers to say, okay, please give me a list of the things that if that person hasn't got it, you won't employ them. Categorically, they have to have that, like Excel for accountancy, whatever it might be. Now, everything else on that list is now a nice to have. So let's frame it like that. And by the way, let's also put a welcome mat at the top that isn't the standard blah, 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 legal, we don't discriminate thing, but is actually a welcome mat to the people that we'd love to have to increase our neurodiversity, and by that I mean lots of different people, and actually increase our innovation and resilience, which is all the industry is actually about after all. So, that's, yeah, if we want space to grow, we've got to ditch the bro culture, not the people.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you. On to Amanda.
Hi. I think we need to give the guys a break, only in the sense that it's come out of history, but unfortunately security's attracted people from the armed forces and IT and areas that have been predominantly male. So they can't help it, bless them, is I suppose where I come to from that. But I'm hoping that it's changing. I think one of the things that I'd like to get over at this point is that if a guy applies for a job, he'll look at it and there are these awful, what I call unicorn jobs descriptions out there where they're expecting everything, including being able to walk on water and commune with the angels, is that a guy will apply for a job if they think they've only got 50% of the talents. A woman, conversely, will apply for something only if they think they've got 100%. So don't be put off by job descriptions. They are often looking for everything, but they're not going to get all of that in one person. So have the confidence to apply for something. Somebody said earlier, if you can do everything on that role, then it's probably not the job for you, because you're going to be bored in a year's time. So that was one of the things that I wanted to say, is that I think that there are a lot of companies now that are being far better about diversity and trying to be more inclusive. And those are the companies that you want to work for, really. So look for organisations that are encouraging people to come from different backgrounds, and that will invest in you as well, because we've been chasing the ready-made security person for too long, and that organisations need to realise that they've got to grow talent. There are some fantastic things out there like apprentice programmes, graduate programmes, development programmes. Those are the sort of organisations you want to be working for. And some of the people in this group have demonstrated already that they are providing those opportunities.
Thank you. On to Ranjit and then back to Nicola.
Yeah, thank you. And Amanda, I have to echo that, just to follow on from what you said about the companies that are providing opportunities like apprenticeships. That was one of the things I was going to raise, is that from BT's perspective, given that I work for BT, having been involved in the gender diversity and women in tech initiatives, is to promote women in a whole range of roles, including IT and cybersecurity. And on the bt.com careers pages online, anyone can go in there and apply for the apprenticeship schemes, which are for school leavers, 16 to 18-year-olds, but it doesn't cut off at 18. If you're a school leaver, you do the application. There are a number of criteria in a selection. But the thing is, it's learning while you're earning as well, as they like to say on there, which is great that it sponsors you to achieve, higher level qualifications and or degree, whatever suits your abilities, but at the same time getting the practical experience and that exposure as well. And what we've done on going back to Liz and others pointing out about the advertising and the job descriptions is actually to address that. A lot of effort has gone in the last few years to change our advertising, both for jobs and apprenticeships. And if you go on the pages, you'll see, a whole the actual gender diversity and women in the forefront. Even for engineering jobs that BT Openreach used to just have an engineer, a male on top of a pole. That has all changed, and you may have seen it on the BT ads now as well, where women are portrayed. So one of the greatest things is, that there are apprenticeships, internships and sponsorship, as you're saying, and we are actively trying to diversify in the IT area. And, if women or, females actually fit the criteria, and it doesn't have to be 100%, and we see the potential, that's one thing we are actively pursuing, because a lot of the studies, which at the board level, they've seen that having women through the workforce at all levels means that the company is more productive than the ones who don't have women on the board. So I just echo everything, but we are pushing for that change in advertising, marketing and the recruitment process.
Thank you. On to Nicola again.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up a thing that Amanda quite rightly said, which is that there's that history that we have to take account of. It's much deeper and more insidious like that. There's actually the underlying bias that people have, the unconscious bias, and also the fact that because of history, everything's programmed by gender and languaging to be male orientated. So one of the things that we need to be able to do, because let's face it, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. We wouldn't even be able to vote as women if people hadn't been chucking themselves in front of horses. So for us not to speak up when we see the fact that people are going, we really want more women in our organisation. Okay, well, have you put all your adverts through a gender bias test? It's really easy. Here it is. Oh, no, we haven't. So are you going to do it? No. Well, you don't really mean what you're saying then. And until we actually say to organisations, walk your walk, stop talking the talk and getting all the lovely publicity bonuses from it, this industry isn't going to change. And I don't mean this in a negative way. It's in a positively framed way. If we're making all of this effort to say, look, here's the lovely thing, you just run your thing through it, it's really, really quick, and then it'll tell you where your text is biased. We know there's unconscious bias. Here's a lovely unconscious bias test, so you know where your barometer is, and if you're serious about this, you can mitigate your unconscious bias. All of those things. We all know in this room that women are less likely to apply if they don't meet all the criteria. So it's kind of commonish knowledge. So why isn't every job advert now different? So when Holly goes to look at those adverts, she should be seeing all of them different, and they're not. So this industry, going back to the original question, isn't walking its own walk. It talks really well, but it doesn't necessarily do the things that it needs to do. And people like CiiSec and the group in there are doing loads and loads of stuff to help change that, but it is at a slower pace than I think everybody would like.
That's great, thank you. On to Steph.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of bits that people said. I think, you know, trying to get more women and into this industry and actually getting the industry to understand what needs to change is really, really important. But I think what Nicola was saying, and I think what Liz was saying earlier about also sort of diversity and inclusion across the board, so LGBT, neurodiversity, and understanding actually one size doesn't fit all, and every company needs to sort of adapt for their company and their employees and the people that they want to employ, and everyone is different, and you know, the job description for one person won't work for another person, all that kind of stuff. And I've recently been on Neurovision with Caroline Turner, and it sort of opened my eyes, and I've been on lots of sort of neurodiversity training and gender equality and all those kind of things. And I think for those kind of raising that awareness is needed across every industry, not just cybersecurity. But I just thought I'd just ask what people's opinions on those sort of the wider equality piece as well, just as we're talking about what the industry can do in relation to that. I just thought I'd throw that out there as well, and put a question out there that no one prepared for, so you're welcome.
Thank you. I think Holly Foxcroft was next.
Hi, sorry, I was sat here thinking my hand was raised the whole time, so sorry, late to the game. My first point is I'm just going to mimic exactly what Liz has said. We are in desperate need of an aesthetic overhaul, because, and I would like to take introducing women into cyber, women into industry, and what industry can do much younger, rather than just graduate opportunities or people of working age. I think that interaction with with girls need to be a lot younger, and our image of cybersecurity is either a padlock, an anonymous mask, or a white young male hacker, and he's got to be wearing a hoodie, otherwise it doesn't count. So that aesthetic overhaul, and you've got to think of welcoming people into our industry and what industry do to show themselves needs to actually be targeted at a younger audience. You need to almost train people in, because people choose their careers, believe it or not, when they're in school, or what they think their careers will be. I think the average person changes careers 5 to 7 times, I think I read. But to even know that we exist, to even know what cybersecurity or what industry is, you need to be able to showcase yourself. So that aesthetic overhaul needs to happen yesterday, actually showing women in these roles. There was an amazing EDF advert called This Girl Can, and it was absolutely brilliant. And again, that was run by industry. And I think the cybersecurity industry it's fantastic about talking about inclusion and diversity. I have been involved in many conversations about how to increase diversity and inclusion. And the fact that I am still having these conversations daily shows not enough's obviously being done. We can all talk about the niceties of wanting it all, but not enough, unfortunately, is being done. And what I would say needs to come from industry, and particularly maybe looking at larger companies, is the only influence into the younger generation that people are getting for cybersecurity is from outside academia. So you can look at things like the Scouts and Girl Guides have the cybersecurity badge that Nominant have sponsored. Industry need to, if they want to increase female diversity, you need to start hitting younger, I would actually say, and start looking at younger than graduates, start looking at college and school leavers, but engaging even younger than that, perhaps, because where's your streamline, where's your pipeline coming from in those first instances? Because we know, say, people come into and fall into our industry quite a lot. So just one of my personal opinions.
Thank you. We'll do maybe a couple more people on this question so we can make sure that all of the questions are covered. On to Emma.
Okay, actually, I wanted to address the side question that Steph raised rather than this question specifically, which was more about the more general problem of diversity. And I think that an important point to make here is that often by supporting one particular group, you unknowingly support a wider group of people. So, for example, if we were to target neurodiverse people, for example, often the things that you put in place for neurodiverse people will also be appropriate for minority groups such as women in a particular industry, or even for particular types of men, because the bro culture doesn't represent all men, right? So there are certain groups of men who are probably being excluded from cybersecurity, who would bring a wealth to the industry, who are being excluded by exactly the same things that women and neurodiverse people and people perhaps from ethnic minorities or whatever, it's affecting them too. Now, I come from that from a pedagogical perspective. I'm very interested in the pedagogy of inclusion, and I know that if you put in place things for enhancing teaching for particular minority groups, it has a bigger ripple-on effect across the whole community, not just the particular people that you're targeting. And I honestly believe that that's true for the types of things that we're talking about here. So if we start thinking about how do we help that particular minority group, we're not just going to be helping that particular minority group, we're going to be helping the industry as a whole. We're going to draw in other people as well. And that, you know, it can only help us. We really should be doing it as a matter of course, because it's going to help us.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. On to Nicola.
Sorry to be waving madly. I definitely wanted to answer that message. So I'm literally starting a website up at the moment because I've noticed that there is a really big challenge with diversity and inclusion generally. The website's not about us without us. It speaks for itself. And the challenge is that so often we try and do good things with good intent, but we don't have 50% or more people at the table that are actually the group that we're trying to include. So then we get the language wrong and we talk about neurodiversity, which includes neurotypical people, rather than neurodivergence, which is only people that we want. And that isn't any, it's the fact that we want to do the right thing, but without including the people, we often then exclude them accidentally by using mislanguaging. And Emma was absolutely right. When we get this right for one set of people and we adopt the not about us without us practice, we tend to just get better at everything, because then all of the people that we want to include are at the table and going, well, okay, that actually might work for me or for you, but it's actually going to cause a challenge for me. So one set of people might want disco lights in the boardroom, and the other set of people might go, that's going to give me migraines. And then you can have a proper dialogue so that you reach some kind of solution that actually allows for both sets of people. And that's really what we need to do, is that principle of not about us without us would actually solve so many challenges and remove some of the challenges that we've got where the privileged set the agenda for how accepting we could be for the marginalized. Because women are not a minority. We're actually 50% of the population. What we are is marginalized in our industry in an unproductive way.
You can find other topics and the whole panel in the description. Please like this video to show you enjoyed it and leave comments below with topics you would like to be covered by other panels. If you would like to get involved and become a panellist, please register your interest by filling in the form in the description.